Aaron Blake had built towers so tall they swallowed the horizon. His name was etched on half the skyline, a signature written in steel and glass, a man whose hands had designed monuments the world envied. He lived suspended in penthouses where clouds brushed his windows, driving cars so sleek they belonged in art museums. But the higher his empire rose, the heavier the silence pressed down on him. 4 years earlier, a betrayal had gutted him. Betrayal not from a stranger or a rival, but from the woman once closest to him, his fiancée, Elena. He had proposed to her overlooking the sparkling lights of Paris, ring flashing like a promise of eternity. And for a while, her smile made his restless spirit believe in something other than ambition. Until her gaze turned elsewhere. In the cruelest twist, she left him not for another man of warmth or artistry, but for an older developer, a man whose empire dwarfed even Aaron's. The tabloids feasted on the scandal, speculating about wealth, power, triangles of betrayal. But Aaron only saw the smirk in his rival's face and the hollow place where trust once lived. Since then he vowed he'd never love again. If people could be bought, then he would spend only on foundations, columns, atriums. He would design beauty for cities, not for his own heart. And so he retreated into work with monastic devotion. He filled his calendars until dawn blurred into dusk and back. Parties, yes, but empty ones, champagne and crystal that never reached his lips. Women, yes, but none who broke through the glass walls he built around his chest. He was polite, handsome, enviable. But distant. Always distant. By 37, Aaron Blake was known as the Fortress. His buildings impressed. His heart did not. The accident came on an ordinary Tuesday. He'd been inspecting a construction site personally, an old habit. While his executives urged him to let safety managers handle dust and scaffolding, Aaron loathed reliance. He wanted to stand in the belly of his creations, to feel them breathe as they grew brick by brick. The site that day overlooked the Hudson. Gleaming cranes swung like metallic giants. Rebar crowded the skeleton floors. Aaron moved with steady steps, hard hat low, notebook in hand. He took notes mechanically, angled windows, reconfigured support, his mind already rewriting blueprints. Until a snapped cable shrieked like lightning through the air. Workers shouted. Metal crashed. A bundle of steel rods dropped from a faulty pulley. Time seemed to slow. A thunderous weight above, the instinctive step backward not fast enough. Pain ripped through his side. The world blinked out. When it blinked back, it was to antiseptic light. Aaron opened his eyes, groggy, surrounded by beeping machines. His ribs screamed, his arm bandaged, his head swimming with morphine fog. He tried to sit, agony forced him down. A voice cut through the haze, calm, steady, utterly unimpressed. Don't be stupid. You're stitched together like patchwork. Move like that again and you'll undo a surgeon's entire morning. He turned his head and saw her. She wasn't like the nurses in hospital dramas, meticulously staged. Her brown hair was tied in a messy bun, wisps defying gravity. Her scrubs were plain blue, speckled faintly from long shifts. Her eyes, a cool gray, met his with no awe, no adoration, no flutter. Only practicality. Who are you? His voice rasped. Nora, she replied, jotting something on her clipboard. And you're Aaron Blake, brilliant architect with an ego bigger than his buildings. He blinked, startled. Excuse me? She looked up finally, arching an incredulous brow. Don't act surprised. You're on magazine covers. My nephew has toy blocks in the shape of your skyscrapers. But here, Mr. Fortress, none of that matters. You're just a stubborn patient I have to keep alive. No reverence. No fawning. Just blunt dismissal layered with professionalism. Aaron didn't know whether to be offended or intrigued. Most people, he said slowly, treat me a little differently. Well, Nora replied, setting down his chart firmly, most people aren't paid to roll their eyes at you when you try to be charming under morphine. Aaron opened his mouth, then closed it. For perhaps the first time in years, he'd been disarmed not by beauty or calculated wit, but by sheer disregard. The days that followed were a battlefield of wills. Aaron, restless by nature, despised lying still. He demanded early walks, argued with physical therapy schedules, insisted he could return to meetings within the week. Nora shut him down every time with surgical precision. These bones don't care about your calendar, she said briskly, adjusting his fore. He scowled. I have a multi-million-dollar project waiting. Then let them wait, she shot back. You can't build an empire if you're dead. Her bluntness left him stunned, then oddly amused. Around his board, people walked carefully, feeding him efficiency and deference. Around Nora, he might as well be a construction rookie asking where the bathroom was. Something about it unnerved him. But beneath the irritation, he felt something else long dormant. Curiosity. Late at night, when pain slowed him into grudging stillness, he heard footsteps padding softly outside his room. Nora would stop by even off rotation, adjusting his pillow or dropping sarcastic comments about his patience level, somewhere between toddler and traffic jam, until he chuckled despite himself. And sometimes, when she thought he slept, she'd glance at the skyline through the hospital window, her face unguarded, wistful. There was weight in her gaze, burdens she didn't share. He wondered what world she carried on her back. A fortress recognizes another fortress. And though Aaron Blake had sworn love was dead to him, something in his chest, brittle but undeniable, shifted ever so slightly. By the end of his second week in the ward, repairs were underway, bones healing, stitches steady. But it wasn't his body he noticed mending. It was the walls around his silence. He found himself waiting impatiently for the sound of her entering. For her unsentimental jokes. For the way she told him off without flinching, as though his name meant nothing beyond a man stubborn enough to need saving. And for a man who'd thought himself untouchable, it was the most dangerous feeling of all. Aaron Blake had negotiated with senators, stared down rival developers, and convinced city councils to rezone half a borough with nothing more than a pen and his infamous glare. He wasn't just used to getting his way, he was built to. His whole life had been a campaign of willpower, torque, and steel until even skylines bent to his pencil strokes. It started with the food. Hospital trays were beneath him, of course. Gray chicken, limp vegetables, powdered mashed potatoes salted within an inch of their lives. How could an empire-building man endure this cafeteria torture? Order me something proper, he said on the third day after regaining alertness. He handed her his phone. There's a restaurant 2 blocks down. Steaks, fresh greens, actual flavor. Have it sent up. Put it on my account. Nora stared at him without moving. You're on medication. You think you want steak now, but your stomach will send it right back. Enjoy the hospital chicken, Mr. Luxury. I'm not eating rubber disguised as protein, he snapped. Then you can starve, she said evenly, tugging the phone from his grip and setting it on the side table. Your body isn't running a Michelin guide. It's running on recovery. If you fight me on this, prepare for tuna casserole tomorrow. Aaron stared open-mouthed. You're blackmailing me with tuna? Yes, she said. And trust me, it wins every time. He sat back outraged and then laughed, caught off guard by his own amusement. Nurses weren't supposed to outweed him. Certainly not with cafeteria menus. The second battle, mobility. I'll be walking by the weekend, he informed her confidently during a check-in, his voice the same one he used to announce project completion deadlines. She raised her brow without pausing in checking his fore. No, you won't. I heal fast. You fractured ribs and tore ligaments. This isn't a Marvel movie. You're grounded for weeks. Nora, he emphasized as though invoking his name made miracles. You don't understand. Investors expect me. No, the force in her voice stopped him cold. The only person who expects anything right now is your body. And it expects you to stop playing hero long enough to let it knit itself back together. Her gray eyes bored into him, calm and stern. Investors don't care if you collapse on a stage. I do. And I'm not letting you destroy my work because you're addicted to control. For a moment, silence crackled between them. Aaron felt stripped. Overruled, not by an investor, not by a rival, but by a nurse who refused him like it was her oxygen. He had half a mind to call for another nurse, complain about unprofessionalism. He imagined sending her away with a check large enough to silence any retort. But something in his chest, sharp and stubborn, pulsed differently. She had told him no, firmly, unapologetically. And it didn't feel like rejection. It felt like rescue. Over the following week, Aaron found himself oscillating between irritation and fascination. When he complimented her, "You're very efficient, Nora," she snorted. "That's my job, not a date resume." When he tried charm, Do all your patients get this much of your warm personality, or am I special? She deadpanned, You're special in the way migraines are special. When he hinted that her face looked too sharp with exhaustion, You should take more breaks, she didn't flutter in gratitude like others might. Instead, her lips tightened. Breaks are a luxury some of us don't have. I'll take one when your vitals permit. Each boundary, each dry quip, each unflinching refusal built a strange kind of magnetism. Because everyone else bent around Aaron like reeds in the wind. Grace his whims. Shape their tone to his mood. Nora didn't bend. Which meant when she chose to stay to help or, heaven forbid, to smile, it was an obligation. It was choice. And choice he realized was priceless. Bit by bit, conversations deepened despite her walls. Late one night, sleepless from pain more emotional than physical, he asked quietly, Why nursing? You're smart, sharp. Could have chased law or medicine. Why, this? She glanced at him, weighing whether it was worth engaging. Finally she sighed. My mom went through 3 surgeries before she passed. Nurses were the ones who fought for her when doctors brushed her off. They stayed when she cried at 3 a.m., not just for meds but because she was scared. I wanted to be that presence. The person who doesn't treat patients like symptoms. Even stubborn architects who think they're invincible. Her voice softened at the end, but her eyes were hard with memory. Aaron realized she had scars of her own, stitched invisibly under the scrubs. And suddenly he wanted to protect her? The irony nearly broke him. She was the healer here, not him. What complicated matters more was something subtle. The first real laugh. Not one of her sarcastic snorts, but a light, genuine outburst when he botched a crossword puzzle brag. I'm telling you it's I'll, he declared, pointing at the half-filled word square. It's not I'll, Nora muttered, scanning the paper. Look, 4 letters. Medieval church entry. I'll. She burst into laughter, gray eyes crinkling with amusement he'd never seen. It's apps, you moron. An aisle is what your buildings sit on. God help your contractors. He stared, startled. He'd never been so gleefully insulted. Somehow that laugh, unguarded, unweighted, carved into his chest like light through stone. By the 4th week, Aaron felt less like a titan under siege than a boy rediscovering forgotten territory. Every time Nora walked in, the fortress softened. Not collapsed entirely, but softened. And with each no, each dismissal, each jest, he felt something terrifyingly new, craving her approval. Because she gave it so rarely, because she offered no flattery, because for the first time, yes from her might mean something real. Of course he flirted anyway. He couldn't help himself. You know, if this were a movie, this'd be the part where the patient wins over the nurse. Not a chance, she said without missing a step. Why not? Because movies end after 2 hours. I still have to live with your whining every shift. He grinned, undeterred. So you admit you'll still be here. She rolled her eyes, but beneath it, he caught the faintest twitch of a reluctant smile. And that single curve of her lips felt more valuable than the skylines his empire owned. By the time he was cleared for partial discharge, Aaron realized he was dreading leaving the hospital not because of the pain, but because of her. The fortress had been breached, and the nurse who said no was now the only thing he couldn't imagine saying goodbye to. Aaron Blake stepped out of the hospital for the first time in 6 weeks with the strange sensation that the world had grown while he was gone. Skyscrapers gleamed across the city as if to taunt him. Look, your empire hasn't waited for you. His driver stood ready, black sedan polished to glass, assistants hovering with files threatening to burst, and yet the taste in his mouth wasn't pride at return. It was sour. He realized why within moments. The hospital doors closed behind him and Nora wasn't at his side. The silence in the car swallowed him. Numbers, emails, schedules poured back into his life like floodwater, and for the first time, Aaron hated being the man everyone deferred to. He had grown addicted, disturbingly, to the only woman who pushed back. Their paths should have separated. Discharge meant the architect back to skylines and the nurse back to shifts. But Aaron found reasons, ludicrous excuses even, to orbit her world. On his 2nd day back, instead of diving into contracts, he showed up at the hospital under the guise of thanking the staff. In truth, he was hunting for gray eyes behind blue scrubs. Nora saw through him immediately. Oh no, she muttered when he appeared in the hallway flanked by impressed interns. What are you doing here, Blake? Forgot to steal a bedpan? Aaron smirked. Came to deliver gratitude. And see if your sparkling personality was still terrorizing patients. Alive and well, she deadpanned. Now go before you make a scene. Not until you accept lunch as thanks. Her brows shot up. You don't give up, do you? Not when I'm designing towers. Not when I'm chasing nurses. Her lips twitched, the beginnings of either irritation or laughter. I don't do lunches with patients. Or billionaires. Double disqualifier. He leaned closer, smirked disarming. Good thing I'm not your patient anymore. She didn't budge. Still a billionaire last I checked. That's enough of a deal breaker. That night, Aaron lay awake in his penthouse, staring out at a skyline he had once considered his kingdom. Yet all he could think about was how Nora refused him without blinking, without hesitation. Her refusals weren't cruelty, they carried integrity. He realized how rare that was. Most women he'd dated wanted access to his world. Nora wanted insulation from it. And maybe, he thought with something between irritation and awe, that's why I need her near me. The third encounter happened unexpectedly. Aaron, newly enrolled in physiotherapy, arrived at a public rehab center recommended for discretion. Imagine his shock when he found Nora volunteering by the weekend, helping elderly patients ease into parallel bars or encouraging wounded veterans to try another lap. You again. She sighed when their eyes met across the room. He shrugged innocently. Followed doctor's orders. Didn't realize you moonlighted as a superhero. Don't start, she warned, but the tiniest shade of pink brushed her ears. Watching her guide others, kneeling to adjust a prosthetic, cheering when a frail old man managed 2 shaky steps, sliced through Aaron. How many nights had Nora done this unseen, without applause, without magazines branding her legacy? How many lives had she touched with such sincerity, while his own empire devoured applause yet fed little more than glass towers? It rattled him. Later, as they ended simultaneously, he offered her a ride. Predictably she refused. I take the bus. Keeps me sane. Come on. It's raining. My umbrella works. You'd rather wrestle for seats than accept comfort? Yes, she said flatly. Because your comfort comes with strings, Blake. Always has. Always will. The truth of her words stung. But when she boarded that bus into a storm-soaked coat clinging to her, something deep inside him clenched. Collisions multiplied. He invited her once, just once, to see one of his project launches. She arrived reluctantly, jeans and sneakers among gowns and glitter. Whispers trailed behind her like static. Who is she? Why her? Aaron noticed her stiff shoulders, her quick retreat to the quiet corners. He regretted the invitation instantly. He joined her in exile, offering champagne she refused. We shouldn't be here, she murmured. You belong wherever you choose to be. You don't get it. She looked at him, gray eyes cool as stone. This world of yours, it eats people like me. Takes their ordinariness, twists it into ridicule or spectacle. I won't let it cheapen me. Her spine straightened, dignity etched across every line, and Aaron knew then, she wasn't resisting him. She was resisting everything he stood for. And somehow the realization didn't push him away. It pulled him closer. One night, tempers finally snapped. You keep chasing me, Nora burst, frustration spilling after a long shift. But you don't even know me, Aaron. You know a nurse who told you no, who doesn't drool over your wealth. You think that's love? That's just novelty. He flushed, anger mixing with hurt. I know you've lived more honesty in one shift than I've had in years. I know you care more about the old man's second lap than you ever will about my billions. I know. His voice trembled, unexpected. I know that the one person I actually wait to hear from now is you. If that's novelty, then fine. I'll take it. Her eyes softened, conflict warring inside. For once she didn't fire back immediately. Instead, quietly she said, if you want to know me, you'll have to learn that I won't bend to your world. You'll have to walk into mine. And my world doesn't care about skylines. It cares about whether you're still there when the shift ends at 2 a.m., whether you can sit on cold bus benches, whether you can stand not being Mr. Blake for 5 seconds. The challenge sliced clean. Aaron nodded slowly, heart thundering. Then teach me. That night, long after she left, Aaron sat on his penthouse balcony with the city at his feet. For once, the skyline didn't make him proud. Made him lonely. But somewhere below those towers, a nurse boarded late buses, carried exhaustion in her bones, laughed too rarely, and still found ways to heal people forgotten by elegance. Collisions hurt. But for the first time he realized cracks weren't weakness. Cracks were where light could enter. For all Aaron's fascination with Nora, he realized he knew alarmingly little about her. He knew she was direct, he knew she worked herself beyond exhaustion, and he knew she met his empire's weight with unimpressed shrugs. But the substance of her life, the scaffolding beneath her steel-gray eyes, remained guarded. And she intended to keep it that way. It came to light one evening weeks after their confrontation. Aaron had insisted on accompanying her post-shift, not in the sleek town car he typically arrived in, but by trailing her onto the subway like an overeager Labrador in designer shoes. Nora folded her arms across her chest while they stood shoulder to shoulder with commuters. "You're embarrassing yourself, Fortress Man," she murmured. "I've survived ironworkers cussing at me 3 stories above ground," Aaron replied. "I think I can handle the L train." She snorted. "Wait till you smell the brakes." The train screeched, jolting. Aaron reached instinctively to steady her. She let him, reluctantly, but the thin line of her mouth revealed the tug-of-war she was fighting. When they exited, twilight cloaked the neighborhood, far from his glittering penthouses. The buildings here sagged with peeling paint, stairways smelled faintly of fried food and mildew. She stopped outside a brick low-rise and turned to him sharply. "You can't come up." He blinked. "Why not?" "Because this is mine. And you don't get to turn it into a spectacle. You can't buy this block or renovate it into lofts. You don't belong here." The way she said it, almost like a plea, stilled him. He raised his hands in surrender. "All right. But you can't keep me on the sidewalk forever, Nora. One day you'll have to trust me enough to let me see your world." Her eyes darted away, shutters slamming over windows. Without another word she slipped into the building. He stood feet from the stoop, body scalded with rejection. But beneath it he felt he'd touched something real. And real always resists first. The revelation came later, not by Nora's choice but by accident. Aaron was called for a public council hearing. His company was preparing to launch a development project near a struggling neighborhood. Protesters lined the steps with signs. He noticed a flash of familiar gray eyes at the edges of the crowd. Nora. She wasn't holding a sign. Instead, she stood to the side, talking urgently with a middle-aged woman and a lanky teenager. The boy's features, angular, storm-colored eyes like hers, struck him. A family resemblance. Afterward he confronted her. "You were there," he said quietly, catching her as she stepped off another late bus. Her mouth tightened. "Observant, aren't you? You were protesting my project?" "I wasn't protesting anything," she snapped. "I was supporting my brother." He stepped back, startled. She exhaled heavily, closing her eyes. Her voice softened, resigned. "Fine. You want the truth? Here." Nora's life unfolded like blueprints ripped open. Her father had walked out when she was 12, debts trailing in his wake like oil slicks. Her mother worked nights until cancer hollowed her out. By the time Nora finished nursing school, she'd already been her family's anchor for years. Now, at 29, she supported her younger brother, James, 18, whip-smart but volatile, half a breath away from bad choices that crowded their neighborhood. The only reason she still lived in that cramped apartment? Rent control. So every month, she clawed her way through double shifts to keep food on their table and the bills barely covered. She said it bluntly, without sentiment. But Aaron, heard the exhaustion hidden between her words, the years of shouldering more weight than any ordinary spine should bear. He also saw the fierceness, the protectiveness, the same steel that allowed her to look a billionaire dead in the eye and refuse him. "This is why, Blake," she said coldly, her gaze pinning him in the dim bus stop light. "This is why I don't do gala dates, can't entertain your skyscraper invitations. I don't live in your world. I don't want to. Loving me wouldn't just be hard, it'd be hell. Because my battles don't pause when you want them to." Her voice fractured on the last words, but her chin stayed high. Aaron's throat tightened. "Nora, that's not hell. That's real life. You're fighting for him, for yourself. You think I'd walk away because it doesn't come with canapes?" "Yes." The word left her softly but laced with a belief like steel. "Because everyone does." That confession haunted him. Back in his penthouse, The city lights glittered as if mocking his paralysis. He poured whiskey, but it tasted like ash. Everyone else had walked away from her, her father, stability, fairness, safety. Would he be another in that line? His instinct was to fix things with money. He could pay off debts, buy a new house, send her brother to the best schools. But Nora loathed being anyone's charity. If he swept into her world with checks and security, she'd see it not as love but condescension. The billionaire swooping in to paint over scars instead of respecting them. He realized this wasn't a blueprint he could correct with pen and ruler. This was something raw, jagged. To win grace, not the kind on a tabloid caption, but the flesh and blood grace of her name, he had to live the cracks, not plaster them over. Their next encounter simmered with tension. Aaron caught her outside the hospital. "Don't shut me out," he said. "I get why you keep the walls up. But let me shoulder a little of it. Even just to stand there while James yells or while you're scraping through exhaustion. Let me stand next to you." She studied him long and hard. The street buzzed with horns, people brushed by, but in her eyes was that storm-colored mix. Suspicion, pain, longing. Finally, she said the words that bore every scar from her past. "I don't need a savior." "You're right," he whispered. "You need a partner. And that's harder. But I'm not walking away." Her chin trembled but didn't drop. "Partners," she said, voice quiet, "don't vanish when things get messy." "Then I guess," he said softly but without flinching, "the mess is where you'll find me." That night ended without kisses, without wild declarations, without clichés. Instead, they parted with a silence loaded heavier than words, but softer too. Yet for Aaron it was progress. He'd seen beyond her fortress walls. Family burdens, scars of abandonment, the reason she protected her independence like armor. And he realized he wasn't just falling for her strength. He was falling for her shadows too. Because in them he saw the only kind of honesty that could outlast skyscrapers. Aaron Blake had never stood in line at a corner grocery checkout before. At least not since college. And yet here he was, arms stinging under the weight of overloaded bags, shifting foot to foot as fluorescent lights hummed above and an elderly cashier scanned painfully slowly. Nora had insisted she didn't need help with errands, but Aaron had insisted louder. "Partners," he had told her. She'd rolled her eyes but muttered, "Fine, if you're desperate to suffer, carry the milk." Now, surrounded by squawking toddlers and a teenager chewing gum like artillery fire, Aaron felt like the milk was carrying him. Problem fortress? Nora teased, breezing past with her own bag balanced over one shoulder. "Your driver doesn't usually unload kale? You're mocking me for trying." "Always," she said, lips twitching. Life in Nora's orbit became a daily course in humility. 4 years, Aaron's world consisted of glossy boardrooms, skyscraper renderings, and dinners where wine lists required a magnifying glass. But Nora's days were far less glamorous. Double shifts, quick meals eaten standing, a brother who demanded time and attention by virtue of being 18 and perpetually on the edge of trouble. James tested Aaron almost immediately. The first evening they met, James sat slumped at the kitchen table of their cramped apartment, earbuds dangling, expression carved in permanent suspicion. "So this is the billionaire?" he asked flatly, shoving chips in his mouth. "Architect," Aaron corrected. "Same thing," James muttered. "Fancy suit, fancy hair, fancy," he gestured vaguely at Aaron's shoes. "You have no business here." Aaron opened his mouth to argue, but Nora's sharp glance warned him not to. Instead, Aaron took a breath. "Maybe not. But I care about your sister. So here I am." James rolled his eyes so hard Aaron feared permanent injury. "Care? Guys like you don't care. You collect." The jab stung more than any investor insult. Later, when James disappeared into his room with a door slam, Aaron asked softly, "Is this war?" Nora shrugged, her voice weary. "It's Tuesday. He's angry at the world and billionaires are easy targets." But what she didn't say, what Aaron noticed in the tightness of her jaw, was her fear of losing him to that world. Over the next weeks, Aaron kept showing up. When Nora worked back-to-back hospital shifts, he occupied her apartment like a displaced statue, fumbling through making pasta. "It's glue," Nora declared after 2 bites, helping James with math homework, an endeavor that almost destroyed the fragile détente, and repairing a broken shelf that had tilted dangerously for months. The shelf looked worse after Aaron's handiwork. But it didn't collapse. Not yet. Do you know what a screwdriver is? James asked in disbelief, watching Aaron wrestle the crooked plank. I do now, Aaron grunted through gritted teeth. James snorted, the faintest flicker of amusement betraying his hostility. It was the closest the boy had come to approval. Each ordinary task seemed tiny, but to Aaron they felt like mountains, because his instincts screamed at him to solve with money. Hire a handyman, order catered meals, send James to elite tutoring schools. He could erase years of stress with a single checkbook. But Nora's warning echoed, I don't need a savior. I need a partner. So he bit his tongue, kept his wallet sealed, and instead tried to earn what money couldn't buy, trust. One Saturday, Nora dragged him to the neighborhood community center. They're short-staffed, she explained. Help if you can. He expected a quick volunteer appearance, handshakes, maybe sponsorship. Instead, he found himself lugging folding chairs, refilling juice pitchers for kids, and scrubbing sticky paintbrushes. His expensive watch nearly drowned in tempera paint. James snickered so hard he nearly fell off a bench. But Aaron kept going, silently, stubbornly. At the end of the day, one little girl tugged his sleeve. Thanks, mister, she said, gap-toothed grin lighting up her face. You painted the sun funny, but it's still good. Aaron looked down at the lopsided yellow circle he'd smeared across a mural. He laughed softly. That's the nicest insult I've ever gotten. When he recounted it to Nora, she grinned, a real grin, not a smirk. Welcome to my world. Yet cracks showed in him too. One evening, Aaron snapped after a brutal call with his firm. Executives warned profits would plunge if he continued ignoring business trips. His voice was raw when he caught Nora after her shift. I can't juggle this, he admitted, pressing temples with his palms. Skylines demand me. You demand me. One of them will collapse. Her gaze hardened. Careful, Blake. I don't demand you. I don't beg. If you choose your empire, choose it. Just don't pretend you can keep both without bleeding. Her honesty lanced him open. But later, as he sat in her living room while James pounded music from his bedroom, he realized something. He preferred this messy, noisy, ordinary chaos to silent penthouses and gala stages. He preferred burnt pasta and crooked shelves if it meant her laughter across the table. For once, he didn't want both worlds balanced. He wanted this one. And slowly Nora saw the proof. It wasn't in gifts. Aaron didn't show up with diamonds. It wasn't in grand gestures. He didn't buy the community center a new roof, though he wanted to. Instead, she saw it in him carrying groceries awkwardly, in him nodding to neighbors like he belonged, in him trying, truly trying, not to overwhelm her world with his own. One night, after another long shift, Nora slumped into her tiny apartment, hair damp with drizzle. She froze when she saw Aaron asleep on her couch, James's video game controller slipping out of his hands. The billionaire, fortress man, architect of towers, had spent the evening battling digital zombies with an unruly teenager. For the first time in months, Nora laughed so hard she had to press her fists to her eyes. And in that moment, some of her walls thinned, not by money, not by persuasion, but by proof that maybe, just maybe, this fortress man was willing to crumble brick by brick if it meant standing beside her. It began innocently enough. A flash of camera on the street, a whisper shared in forums, a blurry photo uploaded with the caption, "Is this the nurse scene with Aaron Blake?" By morning it was everywhere. Aaron's PR team called him in a frenzy, voices overlapping on speakerphone. The stories exploded, one said, panicked. Pictures of you at the grocery store leaving that apartment complex. Headlines are mocking, billionaire's charity case, from skylines to scrubs. Another voice cut across, we need to get ahead of this. You can issue a statement clarifying she's just a nurse assigned during recovery. Distance yourself. Quickly. Aaron's jaw tightened. His empire trained him to play chess with perception. One swift denial could erase the scandal. But that denial would mean erasing her. No, he said flatly. I won't bury her to ease your headlines. There was silence, then disbelief. Aaron, with respect, you can't build towers on sympathy scandals. Investors hate distractions. Then they'll have to learn to live with my personal life, he snapped, slamming the call off. But his chest felt heavier. He might shield her from his words, but could he shield her from the world's acid tongue? Nora discovered it sooner than he feared. On break at the hospital, she scrolled through her phone, and froze. Headlines screamed her name, Her workplace ID badge blast zoomed in on grainy pictures. Online comments spilled like broken glass. Doesn't he have better taste? She's clearly after his money. Plain Jane. Ridiculous. Smart play though. Nurses see vulnerable billionaires all the time. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Around her, colleagues glanced sideways with knowing whispers. By the time Aaron showed up at the hospital lobby that evening, flowers in hand like a shield, Nora's expression was dark steel. "You knew," she accused, arms crossed. "I suspected the press was circling," he admitted. "I didn't want to scare you until they shredded my face across headlines." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with restrained fury. "Until my patients read about their nurse being somebody's publicity stunt. You should have told me, Aaron. I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't trust me," she corrected sharply. "And now I look like I'm sneaking around with you for the paycheck I don't even have." That night, in her small apartment, blinds drawn like a fortress, their first true fracture exploded. "I can't live like this," Nora admitted hoarsely, pacing, hands tugging at her hair. "Every time I step outside now it's a joke. I was already stretched thin running shifts worrying about James. Now I've got paparazzi snapping pictures of our mail slot." Aaron moved toward her, voice urgent. "I'll protect you. Security, privacy shields." "There." She rounded on him, voice breaking. "That's the problem. You protect everything with money. I don't want bodyguards at every corner. I want my life back. I want quiet buses and neighborhood grocery trips. What I don't want is to become the cliché they're painting me as." He tried to steady his voice. "Nora, I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she shot back, softer now, almost desperate. "Because the minute I accept living under their gaze, I lose who I am. And I can't lose that, Aaron. Not even for you." The days that followed were corrosive. Reporters lingered by the hospital, pestering patients, ambushing Nora between shifts. Once, she returned home red-eyed after a blogger shoved a camera in James's face, demanding, "What do you think of your sister chasing billions?" James cursed them out. But it was Nora who crumbled later in the kitchen, whispering brokenly, "He's just a kid. He doesn't deserve this storm." Aaron, clenching his fists helplessly, realized his empire had bled into her home like a toxin. For once he couldn't slam a hammer against it. Couldn't sue it silent. All he could do was stand in the rubble beside her. The tipping point arrived at a gala he couldn't skip. Shareholders demanded it, the press expected it. He asked Nora to join him. Against her instincts, she finally agreed, wanting perhaps to prove both to herself and to the world that she wasn't ashamed. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but modest. Walking through the golden ballroom at his side, Aaron thought she outshone every sequin debutante in the room. But the room's whispers cut like knives. "That's her? She doesn't belong here. I give it a month." Nora's back stiffened. She forced a smile and slipped her hand from Aaron's arm, retreating to a balcony. He joined her minutes later, fury coursing in his veins. "You shouldn't have to hear them," he said. "I told you," she whispered, tears finally escaping. "This world eats people like me. We don't get out intact." Aaron cupped her face, his voice rough. "If anyone deserves to walk this room with dignity, it's you. Not them. You." "Words," she said, voice cracking. "You've lived in words and promises your whole life. But I'm choking on this. And I don't know how much longer I can breathe." Later that night, back in her apartment, Aaron replayed her words until they burned into his bones. He wanted to fight the press with declarations, campaigns, protective walls. But he realized something devastating. Nora didn't need him to fight for her. She needed him to stand still, vulnerable, open, to absorb the storm without hiding behind wealth. Stillness was against his nature. But for her he had to learn. 2 weeks later, a viral video shifted the tide. It wasn't planned. Not staged. It happened after paparazzi cornered them outside her apartment again, shouting cruel questions about money, status, dignity. One shouted, "Nora, what's it feel like to be a charity case?" She froze, rage and shame boiling together. Aaron stepped forward, ready to lash out, but she raised her hand, silencing him. She looked straight at the cameras, voice trembling but clear. "It feels like someone seeing me. Not my wallet, not my past. Me. And if you can't understand that, Maybe it says more about your blindness than about my choices. The footage spread like wildfire. Not scandalous this time, but resonant. Ordinary people rallied. Comments flooded. Finally, someone said it. Real love is rarer than billions. Memes celebrated her as the nurse who said no to glamour. Erin watched the clip alone that night, eyes wet, astonished. She'd survived the storm not by retreating, by standing. Nora had saved herself. Again. But for Erin, the storm crystallized his ultimate truth. Strength wasn't measured by towers or decline-proof profits. Strength was a woman in scrubs, shouting quiet dignity into the teeth of ridicule. The storm had broken. And shown him that if he wanted her future, he'd need to do the one thing empires never do: surrender. The headline that followed Nora's viral video should have been a relief. Nurse who shut down paparazzi takes internet by storm. Hashtag not his charity case trends worldwide. Support poured from unexpected corners. Nurses there to remind the world they worked in trenches that never got applause, families cheering Nora's dignity, strangers posting, "She's the real deal, leave her alone." But with public sympathy came sharper backlash from Erin's world. Board members called an emergency meeting. Partners whispered to journalists. One old rival smirked on a late-night show. "First time I've seen Erin Blake so distracted. I guess love makes fools of even the best architects." To investors, Nora's courage wasn't noble. It was liability. During the boardroom ambush, Erin sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, structures of glass and chrome on the skyline behind him. The air smelled of expensive ink on contracts, too many colognes and impatience. "You've built an empire on discipline," one director began. "We respect that. But dragging a nurse with no pedigree into your orbit, publicly defending her against the press, it isn't discipline. It's suicidal PR." Another added, slyer, "We can handle eccentric romances. What we can't handle is when those romances begin to dismantle trust in your judgment. If she distracts you, step back. Quickly." The message was clear: save the empire or save the girl. Erin leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, listening. The fortress version of himself, the architect of ruthless focus, would have cut ties instantly. Sacrificed Nora to keep the scaffolding intact. But the fortress had cracked. When he saw her, he saw not scandal or liability but truth. She was the only person in his orbit who had never lied to him, never sought him for what he owned, never flinched from calling him arrogant, even when cameras blared. To forsake her now would be a betrayal worse than Elena's, worse than any market crash. He felt an unfamiliar surge, not cold calculation but defiance. "You think loving her diminishes me," he said slowly, scanning each face in the room, "but I've never felt stronger than when she's standing beside me. This company doesn't just build steel towers, it builds homes, offices, lives. And if we can't honor the dignity of the ordinary people who live in them, then what are we, gentlemen? Expensive liars." Murmurs rippled. One director tried to interrupt. Erin raised his hand, sharp as a blade. "Let me be clear. Nora Bennett is not liability. She is courage. And if that courage costs us fickle investors who'd prefer I marry another heiress, then let them leave. We'll rebuild without them." For the first time in the board's memory, Erin didn't shield his empire with PR polish. He deliberately set it on fire to prove a point. Defiance lit in the silence. They didn't know how to respond, because their fortress king had traded steel for vulnerability. Word spread as it always did. By that evening, another headline broke: "Blake confirms relationship with Nurse Bennett, she is courage." Video clips aired his speech, his insistence on her dignity. It went viral faster than anticipated. Some sneered, calling it a publicity act. Others, millennials tired of tabloids, workers in ordinary jobs, clapped back online. Finally, a billionaire actually admitting an ordinary woman's strength. Nora discovered it late that night when her phone lit up with messages. She opened one clip and froze at his words, "She is courage." Her throat closed. But when Erin knocked on her apartment door that night, she didn't greet him with medals. She greeted him with suspicion. "You said that in front of your board? On record?" "Yes." "What if it costs you?" "It already has," Erin admitted with the ghost of a grin. 3 investors cut ties today. Apparently courage doesn't yield dividends. She stared at him, lips tightening. "And you're Okay with that? He stepped forward into her space, his voice low with unshakable conviction. I've spent my life building towers. I can build them again if I need to. What I can't build twice is trust with you. If I let you burn under that spotlight alone, I'd be worse than a coward. I'd be your father, your ex, every person who ever walked away when things got hard. And I refuse. Her chest heaved, her arms trembling as if holding invisible weight. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, softly, dangerously, she whispered, "You don't get it, do you? Choosing me means choosing my brother, my struggles, my messy apartment, my world. They're not accessories you parade in a boardroom speech. They're forever." "I know," Aaron replied. "And for the first time, forever doesn't scare me." The next week the firestorm grew. Tabloids doubled down, mocking headlines, charts comparing Nora to billionaire exes. Late-night comedians joked about Cinderella and Scrubs. Anonymous commentators said she'd never survive. But something unexpected blossomed alongside the mockery: solidarity. Hospitals sent in letters of support. Workers in uniforms, bus drivers, waitresses, cleaners, began to circulate messages online. "She is one of us." The phrase from Aaron's board statement, "She is courage," flooded hashtags. For once, Aaron's empire wasn't leading a project in steel, but a movement for dignity. And though many resisted, many more embraced it. Of course, Nora wasn't swooned by memes or headlines. When Aaron visited her one evening, damp from rain, she looked him over and asked flatly, "Do you regret it yet?" "If I did," he said, smiling faintly, "I wouldn't be here dripping on your carpet. I'd be at some gala with someone in sequins." Her lips twitched despite her attempt at severity. "You're insane, Blake." "Maybe. But at least I'm insane with you." That night, as they sat on her couch, silence swaddling the rain outside, Aaron reached for her hand. For once she didn't pull away. He intertwined their fingers, raw honesty anchoring him. Defiance hadn't destroyed him. It had finally freed him. Because fire hadn't just burned his empire's illusions. It illuminated the woman whose courage he would defend until no board, investor, or rival could doubt it again. And for the first time in his life, Aaron Blake, the man called the Fortress, realized he was ready to let the fortress fall. The night after Aaron's public stand, Nora couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her narrow bed, sheets twisted around her legs, the voices of gossip panels still ringing in her ears. It didn't matter that he had defended her with words that shook boardrooms. The little voice inside her kept whispering, "What if this ends the way it always does? What if he walks too?" By dawn, she gave up on rest entirely, pulling on her jacket and walking aimlessly beneath the bruised sky. Rain slicked the sidewalks, neon signs hummed tiredly against empty streets. She found herself drawn, almost against her will, toward the high rise that bore Aaron's name like a crown. The lobby smelled of polished marble and power. Security raised their brows as soon as she entered, but one phone call upstairs silenced them. Minutes later she was in his penthouse, confronted by a wall of windows where the sunrise bled pink through the skyline. Aaron stood near the glass, coffee mug in hand, his hair stubbornly ruffled. "You couldn't sleep either?" he guessed. She crossed her arms, trying to keep her voice level. "Of course not. The internet thinks I'm the nurse who trapped a billionaire." "Let them think it," he murmured. "They've always needed myths. We just live through them." She shook her head. "Easy for you to say. You had practice being invulnerable. Me? I was just trying to make rent." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Aaron set his mug down, turned and walked toward her. "Nora, you think I'm invulnerable? Aren't you?" "No." His voice cracked unexpectedly as though something raw sat at the base of it. "You think I built walls for fun? I built them because I was gutted once. I told you Elena walked away, but I never told you one thing. It wasn't just betrayal. She told me to my face that I was hollow. That money was all anyone ever wanted from me. That even my love was sterile because I never let anyone actually see me. That's what she left me with." Nora blinked. The weight of his confession shifted something in the room. "I've spent years trying to prove her wrong," Aaron continued, quieter now. "I built towers higher. I silenced pain with glass and steel. And then I met you. You don't see the empire. You see the mess underneath. And it scares me because if I lose that chance, if I lose you, it proves Elena right. That I really am just hollow." His eyes, usually sharp as steel beams, went unguarded. Nora's breath snagged. She had thought he was made of unshakable certainty. To see him fracture like that, not as Aaron the fortress but Aaron the man, stabbed through her cynicism. "You're not hollow," she said softly, surprising herself. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Her jaw tightened. "I know because hollow men don't ruin their board meetings to defend me. Hollow men don't hold teenage boys' Xbox controllers until 2 a.m. just for companionship. Hollow men don't listen like you listen. You're not hollow, Aaron. You're human. And maybe that's scarier for you than being empty, because it means you can break." Her words lingered. He stepped closer, tentative, as though she might still bolt. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. "You build walls just as high. What's inside yours?" For the first time her gaze dropped. That night, Nora didn't collapse into his arms in a movie ending. Instead, she let him hold her, stiff at first, then trembling like someone holding onto something too fragile to believe in. "This is impossible," she whispered into his chest. "All of my skyscrapers started as impossible sketches," he murmured back. "But I made them real. Why not us?" She laughed softly, hopelessly. But she didn't pull away. News traveled fast. By the end of the week, 3 major donors dropped their contracts from Blake Enterprises. Harold unleashed fury in meetings, slamming tables, warning Aaron he was throwing away an empire for a nobody nurse. But Aaron stood unflinching for the first time. "If towers crumble because I refuse to abandon the only person who ever kept me human," he told Harold, "then maybe the towers weren't worth building." Harold stared, stunned. Then scoffed. "You'll regret this." Aaron met his gaze coldly. "I regret every year I wasted being your version of me." The silence afterward thundered. For the first time, Aaron wasn't the fortress built in Harold's image. He was something riskier, a man willing to let the fortress fall for the sake of love. And though Nora still tiptoed, still doubted, still whispered, "This can't last," in her private moments, she knew something had shifted monumental. Because Aaron Blake hadn't just chosen her. He had chosen against everything else. In the rubble of legacies and towers, an unglamorous, fragile, impossibly necessary truth gleamed. He belonged with her. Even if the world called it ruin. For the first time in 13 years, Aaron Blake didn't wake up to the buzz of his assistant's calendar. He woke up to the smell of burnt toast. Blinking groggily, he sat up on Nora's couch, the couch with the uneven cushions and the blanket that always smelled faintly of lavender detergent. James's laughter erupted from the kitchen. "Then, sorry? Smoke alarm's fine, don't panic." Aaron stumbled in to find Nora glaring at the toaster while James doubled over laughing. A slice of charcoal masqueraded as breakfast on a chipped plate. When they noticed him, James smirked. "Morning, fortress. First time you've shared my sister's couch instead of a penthouse bed, huh?" Aaron rubbed his temples, but he was smiling. "You deliberately tried to burn down breakfast, didn't you?" "Character-building exercise," Nora muttered, tossing the toast in the trash. "You billionaires don't get enough of that." Instead of irritation, Aaron laughed. A light, genuine sound that startled even himself. He thought back to boardrooms that smelled of mahogany and fear. In all their gravitas, none had ever given him this kind of joy. Burnt toast, sarcastic banter, and the sight of Nora in an old t-shirt looking more real and more vital than chandeliers ever had. And just like that, Aaron realized, this was what he wanted his mornings to be. The following weeks were strange, almost surreal. Blake Enterprises reeled from investor loss, but Aaron found himself oddly calm. He delegated what battles he could, refocusing his team not on flashy skyscrapers but on smaller, human projects. Affordable housing, community renovations, clinics. At first his board protested. Then unexpectedly shareholders surprised them all. The viral clip of Nora still lingered, and public support for them, made investors grudgingly realize there was cash value in humanity. Aaron didn't care about the spin. For him it wasn't PR. It was survival. For the first time the empire reflected his deeper truth. If it didn't give back, it wasn't worth keeping. One Saturday Nora wandered into his office during these new plans. She eyed the sketches sprawled across his desk. "These aren't towers," she said softly. "They're homes," he replied, gesturing at the designs. Colorful mid-rise apartments with communal courtyards. Affordable, comfortable, not soulless glass. She stared, tilting her head. You're dismantling your own empire. I'm reshaping it, he corrected gently. I spent my life proving I could reach the sky. Now I want to prove I can anchor to the ground. For you. For James. For myself. Her lips pressed tight with conflict. She touched one sketch gently, fingertips leaving soft smudges. You don't have to do this for me. But I want to, he said, voice steady. Because this isn't about towers anymore. It's about building a home. Not just buildings, but us. She blinked rapidly, swallowing emotion. In a whisper, she admitted, I've never had anyone say that before. Aaron's hand brushed hers. Get used to it. Not everything smoothed at once. Paparazzi still lurked. James still muttered about his sister's weird billionaire boy, while hiding secret amusement behind sarcasm. Aaron still had urges to fix things with money, like offering checks when Nora complained about hospital equipment shortages. She would snap, don't buy my work, into silence, and he would grit his teeth, relearning the difference between helping and controlling. But the fights mattered less than the aftermath, because they didn't walk away from each other afterward. And to both of them that was new. Revolutionary. The real shift came one crisp evening on Nora's rooftop. Lights flickered overhead, strung haphazardly, buzzing faintly. They sat on a blanket, old takeout cartons between them. James was out with friends, leaving a rare silence. Nora leaned back, gazing at the stars cut between skyscrapers. Do you ever miss it? She asked suddenly. Miss what? The adoration. The rooms where everyone bows when you enter. The women who saw you as, I don't know, a crown instead of a man. Aaron's mouth twitched. Sometimes I miss silence that wasn't lonely. But the rest? No. Because all those rooms gave me everything but truth. And now, she asked softly, now I have burnt toast and sarcasm. And stars that look prettier from your rooftop than from any penthouse. I'll take that trade. She looked at him for a long moment, something unlocking in her eyes. Then, finally, vulnerably, she asked the question that had haunted her since the market incident months ago. Are you going to stay? Not just against your family or against the headlines. Against me? Against my flaws, my exhaustion, my fears? Are you really staying? Aaron reached across the cartons, took her hand, and laced their fingers together. Yes, he said. Simple. Honest. Not as a promise I can rehearse. As a choice I'll keep making. Her breath hitched. Then with a trembling laugh she whispered, God help me, Blake. I think I believe you. For a woman who once swore she wouldn't, that was a confession bigger than any declaration of love. Weeks later, Aaron stood before a small gathering, not of shareholders or senators, but residents of Nora's neighborhood. Kids clutched balloons, mothers held warm casseroles, fathers joked about construction noise. Aaron sketched on a portable board, low-rise apartments planned for an empty lot nearby. Nora waited at the perimeter, arms crossed fondly, teasing him silently with her gaze. This is the future, Aaron told the crowd. Not skyscrapers scraping clouds. Homes that keep families safe. Because what is architecture if not trust in concrete form? And what is legacy if not dignity for the ordinary? The crowd clapped, but Aaron only looked at one face, Nora's, and saw the tiniest smile spread across her lips. Later that night, as they walked back to her building, she nudged his shoulder. You know, she said softly, you're starting to sound like a poet instead of a fortress. He chuckled. Don't tell Harold. They reached her apartment. The steps creaked, familiar. The hall smelled faintly of laundry soap and curry spices. And for the first time, Aaron realized he preferred this entrance, noisy, imperfect, alive, to any gilded lobby ever bearing his name. Inside, James was sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, rolling his eyes. You two lovebirds done saving the world yet? Nora laughed and tossed a pillow at his head. Aaron grinned, pulling the blanket tighter around his shoulders and settling in. For once, he wasn't Mr. Blake, empire builder. He wasn't the fortress. He was Aaron. And Aaron had finally built something no blueprint could measure. A home. Not an empire of towers, but an empire of togetherness.